I feel it creeping.
We're doing a podcast.
Yeah, so
go
I'm
ahead,
Boo, and we're part of the Everyone community. And so we were just sitting around one day, on Slack, and we're like, me, I was like, bruh, we should totally start one on diversity. Because, I have a lot to say on it, being a heterosexual white male. But,
That's true. You know everything about it.
Oh, yeah. I totally, I know how it feels.
Yeah. And me being Black, non-binary, and a part of the LGBTQ community, I think I know some things about it too sometimes, depending on the day.
I don't know. We'll see.
I know. I
don't know if you'll know more than me.
Oh man, I don't know.
My struggles are way more important, okay?
It is so true. It is so true.
Oh, the irony.
Oh, the irony. And then it's wild because that's how some conversations actually happen too. Like if you're on LinkedIn, you're like, oh well, you've never experienced what I've experienced. And I was like, you being a cis white man, you know what I've been through from being Black and non-binary? Yeah, I don't think you do.
So on that note, when we brought this up, one of the first things that we were asked to talk about, which, I don't know anything about, because it's going to be the subject of pronouns. It's like, we're going to try to give you like a pronouns for dummies, and I don't know anything because I'm from Texas and we just say y'all to everyone.
Exactly.
So I'm either, what's up, y'all? Or hey, bro. And that's it.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I say bro all the time, y'all all the time. I think my biggest thing is I used to say guys all the time, which is like a lot of people up in East Coast will say that because y'all is like, where are you from exactly? So it's definitely like terms for myself of growing into the DEI space. I've definitely like adjusted to everything that I've said because I'm not trying to offend anybody at all.
Yeah, I really didn't even think about, honestly, this whole situation, because I was like, I really don't care what people want to be called.
Yeah. And like when it's y'all, it's like easily enough for Texas. It's like the Southern twang. You're like, hey y'all, we're gonna do this. But I think in other instances, like when I was first working for a company I used to work for, the conference was for LGBTQ professionals, and I was like, hey guys, and I was like, I didn't like notice it, and then my boss came up to me later. They're like, you refer to everybody as guys, and I was like, I was like taken back. I was like, oh my, I feel horrible. I didn't mean it. It was just me getting everybody's attention in the room. And I'm just like, so does everybody hate me now? Like, how is it? It's like the best way. But like for me, especially now, I'm just like with that Texas, I'm just like, hey y'all, hey bro. I'll still say my partner Maddie is a woman. I'll say like, hey bro, what's up? Like we'll do stuff like that. And it doesn't like offend me or anything like that. But it's definitely, I think,
So do you have to take it? So do you have to take every situation like that? Like if I go to a skate shop, like everyone's gonna call me bro or dude.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And no matter what they are, gender wise, whatever, right? Everyone's a bro or a dude.
Yep. I've never I've thought about it more recently now. Like I don't take offense to it because I'm like, I still will call people bro. Like even when I'm texting, like they were like, people used to text me like cis because my pronouns are they them, so I don't identify as a male or female. And they're like, what do I call you now? And I was like, bro or dude is fine because like it kind of works for everybody. I think it comes to a specific situations when you're talking to other people that might be like, hey, if you don't mind calling me that because that's not who I identify as, then you just adjust and say apologize for it. But for me, I never think of it like, I don't get offended by it. Do I get offended when I'm wearing a hat on backwards and people are like, hi sir, and I'm just like, nope. And they're like, hi ma'am, and I'm like, no. But like people, I don't think people out in like day to day when you're at a grocery store or a gas station like realize it. Especially in Texas too, because people in Texas are like yeehaw and just like don't understand the whole pronouns and how a lot of people don't understand how people identify. And so I think like out in like the day-to-day things, like when people are like, oh yes sir, how are you doing today? I like it hurts me a little bit, but there's nothing I can like really do about it because they don't know me personally. If you knew me personally, it's a different story. Like I think that's definitely where I'll take offense if it's like somebody that I know is like, oh, hey, Reese, like, oh, girl, you did really good today. And I was just like, okay, cool, thanks. But like, that's I don't identify that. And I don't think people mean to say that, but it's just like one of those things you're like, oh, dang, it hurts. But like, boo, when you call me bro, I'm like, hey, dude, like, it doesn't bother me at all. Like, I'm just
Right.
like, yeah, that's just how, once I know like the way that you communicate, I'm like, oh, yeah, this is easy enough to communicate like this. Cause like, I'm still like, that softball, like, sup, dude, sup, bro mentality all the time.
I mean, I felt like, it's
Everybody.
so bad. It's like, like I have kiddos here, right?
Yep.
And like, they'll come up there and they're like, bruh,
all the time. It's literally like, bro, today was such a long day. And like, I think people can sometimes take offense to it when it's like having a serious conversation and you're like, oh, I felt upset about that. And they're like, bro, why? And you're like, okay, that hurt. It can hurt certain people that way. But like day to day, I'm just like, no, that's fine. Call me that. I don't care. I'll still respond. Like, it's totally cool.
So, I mean, yeah, I guess the pronouns for dummies will probably, really be talking more on a professional level, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So why is it? Why focus on it?
I think it's more so like from my experience for me. So last year my pronouns were still she, her until like November. And then like I like discovered and was figuring out who I am. And like for me, when it comes to like my they them pronouns, it's definitely like I don't know if I'm gonna transition or anything like that. But when it comes to the workspace, it's like I want to make sure you respect me and respect the work I'm gonna be doing. Like I had a great interview when I was interviewing here in Chin and like understood my pronouns. You did as well, so to Kiki. And I think it's, I want to make sure that whenever I'm going into a space that like you're hiring me for who I am and not because I fill in a box. Like, yes, Reese is Black, they are non-binary, they're part of the LGBTQ community, or anything like that. Like I want to make sure that I'm going into a space that will respect me and understand like, oh, they have a different story than everybody else, but they're here to do work. And I think that's like the biggest thing that would, when it comes to like into the workspace and everything like that. And it's definitely changing for sure with everything that happened within the past couple of years.
Right. So, I mean, so by using all these pronouns, right? I mean, I've heard it's like, how is that more inclusive? How is that, how does that really affect the world, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think people need to realize that not everybody identifies as like male or female, especially when it comes to the trans community too. A lot of people, somebody can be transitioning and people still misidentify them. And it's just like, you identify them in the wrong way. It hurts. I myself am not transitioning, but I've had some friends that are transitioning, and the fact that, once they change their name, it's like known as their dead name and everything. So I think, especially with the way that things are today, that we should definitely respect them because we don't know how everybody identifies when it comes to one thing or to another. You identify certain ways and you have to respect that every single time you see somebody walking into a space.
Yeah. Have you had instances where like people are like, no?
Yeah. I've had instances, not in the professional space yet, but I know it'll happen. But family wise, yes, because people are just so like my family is very, I love them, but they're very Catholic and they don't understand. They're like, oh no, you're supposed to be like with a man, and I'm like, no. But I think it's definitely one of those things where there are instances that people are just like, oh well, you still look like a girl, so like why are you doing they them pronouns? Are you wanting to be a man and you want to transition? And that has nothing to do with pronouns. You can identify any way that you want to and you don't have to transition. Like there's somebody I know that is more masculine that are like, oh no, I want to use she, her pronouns. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Like it doesn't matter how you identify, it's just like you need to respect them anyway that it happens.
Yeah, because
like there's been instances.
From what I get, it's like, I mean, it's a personal, probably sometimes hard journey to even come to that conclusion, right?
Yep,
and
exactly.
Then for someone just to invalidate and be like, I don't care, I'm gonna do what I want to do.
Or it's like the grammar thing where people are like, oh, that's grammatically not correct. So for me to call you them when it's only referring to one person, I'm just like, it is. So because you could say there are a field of cows where there could be just one cow out into the field. Like it's easy enough to do that.
And actually, I looked that up.
No,
Someone had asked me that too. I was like, because they're like, is it isn't that plural? I was like, actually, they have been used as singular since like the 1600s. I
Yep,
was like,
exactly.
I mean,
It's
I didn't know that until I looked it up. I was like, oh, that makes sense. Okay, you know,
Yeah,
but
and I think that's where people are just like, oh, it's grammatically not correct, or oh no, God wanted you to be male or female, and that is it. I'm just like,
we
no,
won't, yeah, we won't start out that
we
religion
won't
or.
go there.
I mean, what's examples of them? Like even, like how many pronouns are there like out there? Just examples that.
There's so many. I can provide a list later, but anybody can identify anyway. So one of my good friends, she identifies as she, they. It's kind of like you can pick and choose, but you can also just pick what you want. So there's usually she, her, they, them, he, him. You can do she, they, he, they, he, they, her. Like it just doesn't matter. As well as there's other acronyms to it. I think it's Z, like a Z-I, Z-E. There's a couple of them, but there's many, and you don't need to like choose from a category. It can just be like, oh, because at first I was like, oh, like maybe I'll just identify as she, they. And then I was like, no, maybe it should be like they, them, because like for me, I'm more masculine presenting, and that's how I just feel naturally every day. And so I think that's like when it comes to picking your pronouns, it's not like you're picking out of a hat. It's just you have to dig deep and figure out how you identify. And you can always change your pronouns whenever you want to. It's not like you're assigned to them for the rest of your life.
So I mean, so people who do this put thought.
Oh yeah.
It's just not like grab bag style.
Yeah, no. It took me it's interesting. So my partner Maddie and I were talking about it in the car, and I was like, maybe I'll identify as she, they. She's like, okay, cool, support it. And then like 20 minutes later down the road, we were just like sitting in silence, and I was like, I think they, them sounds right. And she was like, okay, cool, we do that. And then I woke up the next day and I was like, yep, no, they, them. Like it's definitely something that it can happen within 5 minutes. It can happen within 5 years. Like there's no timeline for it. It's just, trying to figure out who you are will help you figure out how you want to identify as well too.
Right. So when people do make mistakes or misgender or whatnot, like how should one handle it? Like,
so there's two ways. And I always tell this story whenever I give talks. So when we told Maddie's mom that I had my pronouns in it, she'll still mess it up, and I still mess up my own too. It's fine. But we did, like, how growing up you had a swear jar. We did a pronouns jar, and so like anytime she'd mess up, we'd put like a penny in. She can buy me a new Bronco now because of it. But I think when it comes to the professional space, it's more of I would rather have, if it's a boss or a coworker, step up and be like, oh, Reese, I'm so sorry that I misidentified you, and move on. Because it's that muscle memory. It's like, when you're trying to learn a trick on a skateboard, you're like, oh, I keep on falling down. Let me see and learn from it. I think that's the best way to do it when you're coming into a workspace of like, your boss is able to mess up, and just fix it. Where it comes to, like they can acknowledge it and then you move on. It's not like you need to expand on it at all. I think it's more of a, like, oh, Reese, she's doing a great job. Oh, wait, sorry, Reese, didn't mean to say that. Reese, they're doing a really good job, and move on. That's all I need. That's the only validation that would really help out, because from that instance, you keep on learning and you're like, okay, I'm not going to do that. 1, 2, this is a way for everybody else to learn that, like, even a boss or a higher up can make a mistake, because we're all human.
Right. So, I mean, it's not going to be catastrophic if someone makes a mistake.
Yeah. Exactly.
Like an honest mistake, right? Yeah. So how about the other spectrum of it? What if someone makes the mistake, right? And I've seen it before too, where they make a whole spectacle out of it.
Yeah.
Is that even worse?
Yeah, it's awkward. It's definitely, I did a talk during Pride Month this year, and somebody like kept on prolonging it when they were talking about they didn't misidentify me, but they misidentified somebody else, and they kept on prolonging it. And at that instant, it's like, it's when somebody sings you happy birthday at a restaurant and you're like, okay, I don't like this attention on me. It's like that instance for me. Like, I would rather you fess up and be like, I'm so sorry, and move on, because once you keep on going through it, it can then just be uncomfortable. And so I think it's one of those things where it's like, I don't want you to keep talking about it, because you make a mistake, just move on from it, instead of it being like 20 minutes later, why are we still talking about Reese's pronouns when we could be doing other things? I think it's definitely like something where I just acknowledge it and move on, because talking about it longer, it's just I'm an awkward person, so it just makes it super awkward
Right.
for me.
And that's pretty much, is that the sentiment? Like, no one likes that, right? Like,
Yep. Yep.
yeah. So
Yeah.
that kind of debunks the attention seeking versus, I guess, respect, right? That's it. That's
Oh yeah. And it's more of like because I think in the instance that it happened, she was like, oh my God, see, this is why we're doing this talk. This is why this talk is
yeah.
gonna be great, which is understandable, but it's also like, oh, I've made this mistake before. And it's like you're kind of like digging yourself deeper and deeper down
Right.
a hole that you're like, you don't want to be a part of. So it's just like, especially when you're doing a talk for another company, it's just like awkward. You're just like, I don't really know you people. So like this is getting even more awkward. So it's
right.
just like
the
yeah,
last 10 minutes you just spent even
we could have been talking about it
a lot more.
yeah. Now you're like, oh great, now I have more content for my talk for sure. But yeah, I think it's like rule of thumb for me especially is just talk about it, acknowledge it in the moment, and then just move on.
And be like, oh, my bad.
Yeah, literally be
That's
like, Reese, I'm so sorry, move on. Like that's all I need.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, thank you, I appreciate that. And then
Yeah, you don't need to go to a Shakespearean monologue.
no. And if you feel compelled to, at the end of it, like after the meeting ends, like send me a message on Slack or send a message to somebody else in your space, be like, hey, once again, just really wanted to apologize, didn't mean to misidentify you, leave it at that. Then I'll be like, yeah, cool, you're good, no worries, it happens. Like that's
Yeah,
all.
I've seen a situation like that. It was on social media, it was on Facebook or something, right?
Yeah.
Where it was like, the person made a mistake, was like, no, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And the other person was like, oh, that's cool. And then it just kept going on. I'm like,
yeah, like, I don't need it to continue. It's
why
fine.
do you think that happens?
Because I think people really feel like people that do it feel so bad about it, because it's basically like you are what's the word I'm looking for, like I think it's more they're number one embarrassed, but also feel super bad about the situation. So it's just like in their mind they're like, I feel so bad, I should never have done that, I should never have said that. It's like if you make a mistake at work and you're like, oh my God, I'm so sorry, like so sorry, we didn't mean to do that. It's like you keep on piling it on. But once I think it's just they feel embarrassed in front of a group, especially too, especially if it's like a pronoun talk or a diversity talk. It's just like, oh well, now it looks bad of like, oh, this is why we're doing the talk, when in all actuality it's more, you make I make a mistake every single day. I left the house and forgot to put on deodorant and had to run back inside. That's a mistake. Like it's certain things like that you just have to learn from and just move on from it, because you're gonna eventually get it one day.
Yeah, and I think that happens with every subsection of society too. It's like, and sometimes it makes me wonder, like, are you trying to apologize, or are you trying to convince yourself that you're
you're a better person than
you're a better person,
you're trying to make a situation better.
Yeah, which is, it's a cynical part of me, right? I'm like, are you really apologizing? You're just making yourself feel better.
Especially when it's like a talk too. It's just like, oh my God, are you really doing this in front of like a group of 100 people in your company? Like, are you? Okay, all right, that's fine. That was just awkward.
So just do it and move on.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
10 out of 10, just do it and move on.
So what else? I mean, what else would you like to enlighten?
I think especially when it comes to when people are changing. So I will say, for instance, like if you were to have a Slack channel group or any type of communication, like whenever you're bringing somebody onto the team, put in an email like, hey, this is Reese, their pronouns are they, them. Like I know when I first started at Hire Tool, it was they had like my pronouns next to my name when it came to like that bi-weekly like all hands, and I was like, oh, and they like asked me, they're like, are you fine with this? And I was like, yeah, sure, I don't care, like I don't mind. I always have my pronouns literally in my Zoom as well as anything else. And I think whenever you're bringing somebody on, just make sure that they feel like that they're a part of the team, that they don't feel like somebody on the outside that's still like trying to like make their way in. I think, with my Slack and me putting my pronouns on there, I just have it on there. And like, I start a conversation up like, hey, my name is Reese, my pronouns are they, them, how can I help you? We don't need to make it so grandiose. I think, when it comes to the DEI space and being more inclusive, if you're trying to figure out different ways to be more inclusive within a company, just start off with stuff like that, create a Pride ERG, create, different kind of groups internally, because there might be somebody else that also identifies as your company as non-binary, as if you are like it. I think it's finding that area and just making sure people feel validated and are valid, and just feel like, yeah, you're a part of the team. We don't care how you identify, is like, cool, like you're still going to respect my pronouns and everything like that, and I want you to do that for me. Like, I think that's like the biggest takeaway, and like, just know that you make a mistake and it's fine. Like, the president makes mistakes, everybody makes mistakes. Like, we're not perfect, and you can't, I know people try to really strive to be imperfect, but like, once you make a mistake, just own up to it and move on, because if you keep talking, then you just
yeah, I mean, I get it. Yeah, I get it with, of course, me, I get it with race, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh,
and
yeah.
then, I mean, I just tell this, yeah, move on. I'm this, right?
Yep.
But I always get the thing where like, oh, blah blah blah, you're Korean, right? No,
No, I'm not.
I'm Vietnamese, Chinese, and
Yep.
right after that, I always get someone saying something to try to make the connection, like, oh, I love pho.
Yes, and you don't need to connect
Yeah.
with us. Like, it's fine if you're just like, it's fine when you're just like, oh, cool, that's cool. Like, Reese is Black, solid. Like, Reese is non-binary. Oh, my cousin's non-binary too. You don't need to tell me that. Like, I think that's great. Like, good for you, but like, you don't need to do that extra.
Yeah,
like,
to me, it's kind of like the age old, like, oh, some of my best friends are non-binary. I'm cool guy.
Oh.
It's like Steve Buscemi carrying that skateboard going, hello, fellow students.
Exactly. Like, you don't need to take my best advice is like, don't take that extra step. I know in the moment you're like, oh, it's going to be great, we can connect on that, but like, at the same time, it's like that you don't need to connect with me on that. Like, sure, we can have a conversation down the road, be like, oh, my partner's actually non-binary, or I'm actually gay myself too. Cool, we can connect on that. But like, I don't need to know that your third cousin's sister is not binary. Like, that's something like, I'm just like, it's all right.
I understand that it's coming from like, hey, underneath,
I understand.
I'm a person.
Yeah.
Connect with me as a person.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that probably is how you truly just be inclusive, right? It's just,
oh yeah, just be you and just understand and respect people and their pronouns and their experiences too, because you honestly would have no idea some of the stuff I went through growing up, being Black and gay and living in Alabama for 5 years. So like, you would have no idea. But I think that's like the biggest thing. Yeah. So yeah, I think it's like, just respect it and just acknowledge it too when somebody's telling you, like, it's kind of like when somebody tells you that you're wrong, like, be like, oh, okay, because a lot of people don't do that. A lot of people are like, oh no, and people push it off. But I think when you're bringing somebody in, just respect them and respect their experiences, because you don't know what they've been through at all.
Yeah, I would say that. Yeah, right. And take yourself out of yourself.
Yeah, take that step back and be like, let me take myself out of my shoes and potentially put the shoes on that they're wearing into my position and see how I actually feel. Then you would understand it more and you would connect more on a different level than that.
Right, because I mean, yeah, I've seen instances where people get mad. Mm-hmm. It's like, why?
Oh yeah, and like my partner Maddie's huge on LinkedIn and everything like that, and she'll like tell experiences when we drove through. We were coming up to Rhode Island in the first place, and we rode through Arkansas. We didn't stop because there's a thing called sundown towns, and people are like, those aren't real. And I was like, oh, sundown towns are real. You don't
what
stop
is that?
them. Oh, so it's basically there's different cities throughout the US. When the sun goes down, if you're a person of color, especially Black, you don't stop there because you don't know what's going to happen to you. So it's definitely like one of those areas where in Arkansas, especially where the KKK is and all that stuff, there's certain areas that you don't want to stop, because if you stop on the side of the road, you might not.
I understand.
Alive or anything. It's wild. There's a lot of research I can show you about what it is, but it's like experiences like that, experiences like me being pulled over by a police officer.
So here's a connected thought. Baby mama, or my ex, right?
Oh my gosh.
Family was from Pocahontas, Arkansas. So that's the foothills of the Ozarks. So that's But yeah, so I've driven through Arkansas. I've driven through the meth capital of the world, which is I think Newport. And then I remember always telling the story, right? I'm like, yeah, it was awkward being, because in some parts I don't ever think they've ever seen an Asian person.
Nope.
I went to a Walmart in like Pocahontas or somewhere around there. I was like, it was so awkward. You know, I was laughing. I was like, it was so awkward. Like even the black people there were staring at me.
Oh
You
yeah.
know, and that never
Yeah.
happens. It's like everyone was like, "What?"
The fuck? Yeah, exactly.
I was like,
And
"Wow."
yeah,
You know?
it's wild too, because I will say, like, where we live in Texas, I'm just like, I'll tell Maddie, I'm like, oh my god, there's black people here. Like, is there more black people coming to Texas? Like, even where we're up now, they have a good, like, they have wide diversity. But I told her last time we were walking through the neighborhood, I was like, there's more black people here. What's going on? Like, it's one of those things where, like, in the sundown town, it's like you just don't show up. You don't. It's usually just like, nah, that's a cutoff town. But like anywhere else, I'm just like, black people, and I've never like realized that later on in my life. And I'm just like, there's more black people, and I'm like now realizing that. I'm like, oh, cool.
Yeah, that's
hi.
what I realized too. Like, I was like, man, we all have the same stories. It's like if we could understand that,
we can see a lot of things. Yeah.
Right. It's like, you know, I mean, and now you add like, you know, you add your pronouns on top of it. It's just like,
Can
you know,
even
it's
imagine?
like, yeah. So I mean, so let's say how can, you know, people like me, you know, just support and, you know, help spread, not even help spread, because I mean, you don't need that, you know, like you don't need a freedom fighter for your cause, I don't think, right? So
yeah. I think the best way to be like an ally in this space is just kind of remembering when you're communicating, like even if I'm like not a part of the communication, but you're mentioning me, like doing something like that, like putting it in, so like Reese, they're handling this, instead of like making sure that you're taking the use of pronouns and actually using it every day towards like what you're trying to say, or just asking somebody like you've never met, be like, hey, my name is like, if we never met, I think I'm pretty sure the phone call I had, I was like, hey, my name is Reese, my pronouns are there, and you're like, oh cool, my name is Boo, he, him, cool, that's all I need. Like I think it's having small starter conversations out like that, can really help out, because it'll allow you to start a conversation. The other person who identifies a different way is like, oh cool, they respect me, that's great, and we move on. That'd be number one. Number two, I think addressing it in the situation, if you were to mess it up in a meeting, just like acknowledge it right then and there. Three, support wise, is just making sure that like if you hear somebody, not if Reese is, if I'm now talking to the third person, say if I'm not in the room and somebody, you hear somebody say like, oh, she's doing that, be like, oh, they're doing that. And you don't have to be an asshole about it. People might think you're being an asshole, being like, oh, well, why did you just fix my sentence, when it doesn't make sense, when it actually does. I think it's like being an advocate when somebody that identifies a different way isn't in the room, and just making sure that you're just like plugging that
consistent with it,
that they understand and they start to to get it too. Yep. And plus it's like, I think those are, I think those are like the best ways when it comes to it too. And like, you can honestly make it fun when you mess up somebody's pronouns. Like Maddie's mom's gonna probably buy me a Bronco in a couple years because she keeps on messing them up. But like we joke about it and we make fun about it, and she gets mad at herself for messing it up. So it's not like we're picking on her. It's like we're all laughing together. So I think that'll be, you know, those are the top ways in order for like you to become a better ally, and just like ask me if you have questions about it. Like I'm open about my whole life. I can tell you everything I can tell you about my pronouns. Like I'm open to it. And when people aren't open to talking about it, just respect that, because they don't need to tell you their experiences, you know.
Right.
I'm able to talk about anything, but not a lot of people want to talk about how they feel and everything like that.
So basically just don't be a dick.
Exactly. I could have just been like, just don't be a dick, and that could have been the conversation.
I mean, that's
like,
usually what I usually say, right?
Exactly.
Well, you want to be a better person? Don't be a dick.
Don't be a dick.
Don't be an asshole. You know?
Exactly. Yeah. And I think like that's just the main takeaway you should always have. It's just like respect people for how you would want to be treated and respected, and just don't be a dick. Like I almost said an asshole, but I was like, don't be a dick at all.
You say, don't be a fuck face.
Don't be an asshole. Fuck face. There we go.
That's one of my favorite ones.
Oh my god. Yeah, I think that's like the best way to like for us to keep on moving forward and doing like getting more DEI work into the workspace and everything like that, and just being more inclusive. I think that's like number one way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, where do you see the future? Just
the future's so very integrated.
It's so integrated that you know that you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to. Yeah. Is it like to a point where no, you know, don't even need to talk about it? It's just it is what it is.
That's my dream, but I don't think it's really going to happen within the next couple of years. I think for what I see, it's going to take a long time in order for people to understand, respect it, and keep moving forward. I think, there are still some sticklers when it comes to workspace that are like, no, we're not, you can't identify another way, or I'm not going to respect you. And I think, in the
Have
future,
you had situations where like people like work people or like higher ups are like, no, just
I
straight up
haven't, but
no.
I know other people who have, and they have left their company because of that. I've never had that experience since I've changed my pronouns, but will say that I've had somebody who was transitioning. He was like, oh yeah, I'm transitioning, this is what's going on. They're like, we're still going to call you by your other name that you had. And so he was like, no, my new name on my license, on my birth, like everything, because after he transitioned, he was able to get driver's license, all that stuff changed over. And their boss was like, no, we're still going to call you Kat, when their new name was Kevin. And I'm just like, wow, you really are an asshole. Like, that's like the thing that still is so frustrating, especially for the trans community, is that like you go through this process and it is hard on yourself, but the fact that people still don't respect you is even worse. So I think like in order for a change to happen, we need to have people that are in leadership not being assholes in that aspect of it, and just changing altogether and understanding that like
that's a lot. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, when everyone talks about that whole inclusive, inclusion and all that, I was like, it needs to be up top.
It needs to be, yeah. Oh, and that's what I think people are starting to realize too, especially with George Floyd, the murder of George Floyd, and everything.
Yeah, I was like, how can we need to change? Yeah. How are you going to know the stories if you don't have people that have some semblance of what the story is, right? Like,
exactly.
It's the same. It goes for everything, right? It goes for race, creed, religion, whatever. It's like
anything. Yep.
And that's like, I don't think a company could ever be called diverse if I go to their board or their C-level and it's all people like me, heterosexual white males.
Yeah. Yep. And that's the thing too. And I think that'll be the number one changes for that to like, I guess it's fine to have some white men on your team, but like it needs to be more like people of color, women on your board, the people, different ways that people identify need to be a part of that higher up in order for a change to happen all the way down the board.
Yeah, because I mean, I see a lot of people trying to do it bottom up.
And it's nope, you can't do it.
I think that's the biggest mistake. I think that's the biggest misconception.
Oh yeah. It'll take time if you do it at the bottom up, it will, you think you're going to be making changes and then all of a sudden you're not. It's just happening within the level of your team, which is great. But at the same time, you're not being able to reach out to other teams and be like, hey, we're making this change. Where it comes from the top down, it's like, no, this is our policy throughout the whole company. This is where we can start making changes everywhere instead of it just being like a couple.
Right. And I would think the top needs to change before it comes top down. So
100%. 100%.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. And do you think, I sometimes think it's a generational thing too.
Oh, it's like, yeah, it 100%. Well, to respect of certain generations do understand it, and they're like, oh yeah, that's fine. There are some people in different generations that are like, no, but I will say it's probably the biggest thing is it is a generational thing, but like you can relearn it for sure. Like it's
like these, it's like they're like, this is what I know, and that's it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I'm hoping my like happiness in life would be that there's more gay people taking over organizations, but there's more diversity, more color when it comes to higher ups in order to change the world, because that's what we need, honestly.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, I agree. If you run a company, how about matching the population?
Yeah. Just don't hire me for stock photos. The number one thing. I don't.
Yeah. We could talk about fear of being tokenized in another one.
Yeah.
I have that too.
Yeah. That could be our second episode for sure. Yeah, that's like a.
Yeah, so if everyone wants to talk about that, man, hit us up.
Yeah. Look, I'm sure we can get I know a couple people that are easily enough to can talk about that, because it's absolutely wild.
Yeah, awesome. I think that's it. I mean, that's a good first podcast there.
Yeah, and if people don't like it, that's on them. But I've had fun with you, boo.
Yeah, I've had fun. Yeah, if they don't like it, fuck faces.
Fuck them.
Fuck your couch.
Exactly. But yeah, I think we'll probably start doing episodes maybe month, probably a little bit sooner than that, but
It just depends on how people take it, I guess. I mean, they could just think we're all dicks and hate us, so.
I'm still fine to shoot the shit with you every single week. That's fine with me.
I'll definitely, agree to get paid to do this. It's fun.
Exactly. It's fun. But yeah, I think we can maybe our next podcast episode be about tokenism for sure.
I think that's a good one.
Yeah, I'm gonna write it down because if not, I'll forget. Okay, but yeah, that's all I got.
Awesome.